So I think first thing first, let me quickly go back and look at the syllabus. Let me zoom in. If it's too small, let me know. So I think in the previous class, what we discussed during our first class, that we will be covering more or less, one chapter in each class. There are labs associated with each class, even though the labs don't match exactly one-to-one, but more or less we can complete all of these tasks with the labs that we have. And that's where I'll help and assist and go over the labs with you, just so you make sure that things are making sense and you're able to understand the content that we're covering in each class and each chapter. So there are 11 chapters. We covered chapter 10, basically, or chapter 1 for this class. In the previous class, we will cover chapter 2, which is chapter 11, according to this syllabus today. This is a very good chapter. You guys will learn a lot. And then what we will do is we will complete the labs and make sure that you guys understand what the expected outcome is from this chapter, and we'll review it together. I think on one of the weeks there will be some short chapters, so we may end up covering two chapters versus one. So essentially, what the plan is, in 5 weeks, we have total of 6 weeks. This is our week one. In 5 weeks, we'll cover all of the chapters, and the last week we will just leave it for revision. We'll probably do some practice questions together and review any topic areas where you may want us to or want me to review for you guys. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing first, was there any question on the chapter, on chapter 1? Were there any topics, anything that things that didn't make sense, or you guys had any questions? Let's actually address those first. And then when we get to the labs portion, we'll review the lab as well.
I
I was
didn't
having trouble.
I didn't understand the instructions like with the labs. It was kind of
Okay.
confusing.
Okay. But did the chapter make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we'll review the lab once we get to the hands-on portion after we cover the chapter. Anyone had issues with the revision of the chapter? If not, then let's go ahead and get started with chapter 2. All right. So chapter 2 is pretty um, important, and I guess some of the things you may already know, or at least you probably have seen a few things. You guys will learn a lot in this chapter. I think that's going to be every week. But this is one of the important chapters. I think as an IT practitioner, you need to know a lot of the things that we will be covering. So I'll point out stuff that you may see on your interview questions, as well as in the real life scenario, what you might expect to see. The objective, there are three objectives. Of course, there are three sections to this chapter. Let's go ahead and start with the topic A. Is use management consoles. We're not going to be like looking at in depth with these consoles. That's going to be upcoming chapters, but at least they want you to know that these things exist. And by all means, you can play around with these things in your own Windows computer as well as in the lab systems. So again, when you are doing the lab, when you are reviewing the chapter, if it says, "Hey, device manager," here's a slide about it. Open up the device manager, right? Uh, if you don't know where that is, again, that's absolutely okay. But the very first thing is when you have a search prompt right here, right? Anytime they're talking about any tools, just if you type in, as an example, device, you will see that it auto-populates or it tries to auto-complete. It's smart enough to know that. But you will also see if that tool exists on your laptop or even in your lab, right? It will come up. So this is exactly what we are looking at, device manager. If you look at the screenshot, if you look at my machine, besides the computer name change, more or less, this looks very similar, right? This comes in very handy. And you will see we'll go into a little bit more detail in the coming chapter. But the idea is that any device, any hardware that is attached to your computer, if it requires any drivers, you will see them here. So you will troubleshoot. As an example, my monitor is not working. I had actually the device manager opened up right here. I was trying to see if I see any of the errors here. If you have printer is attached and printer is not working, if you have an external keyboard that's not working, it will tell you if it sees any errors. You will have maybe an exclamation mark, maybe red X or something. Or actually over the weekend, my aunt actually, I was visiting my folks. My aunt was there and she had her laptop and she was like, "Hey, my webcam, the camera on my laptop is not working." The very first thing that I did, I opened up the device manager and I said, "Okay, the camera should be here." So I looked around and I looked at um, the display driver. It was under the display. It was under the camera driver. And then when I looked at it, everything looked appeared to be fine. I'm like, there has to be something that's not right. So what I ended up doing was I uninstalled the driver. I downloaded the new driver and made sure that the driver was detected um, with this laptop, and then things started to work. So this device manager again is a built-in tool. If you have a device or a thing that's attached to your machine, your laptop, your computer, and it's not working right, you want to make sure that you look at the details and see if there you see any errors. If I double click on any of these things, it will give you basic information what it is. Usually it'll say the device is working properly. It'll tell you what this is. And if you click on the driver tab, it tells you the details about the driver. Hey, this driver date or the release was back in 2015. The provider is Realtek, that's the manufacturer. Here is the version of the driver. Here is a signature because this is a known driver that's supposed to be installed on your computer. I can disable the driver. I can uninstall the device. These are some of the things that I can easily do. So just know that. Again, don't probably disable or uninstall. You can probably do that in your lab system because you can't really break anything, but don't try to disable or uninstall on your personal laptops or computers. Right, it says removing, uninstalling, and disabling devices. This is what it is. It also has a shortcut as well. This may be on your exam, and you should know these shortcuts as well by heart. So again, I can type in device manager, and as an example, it shows up here, or I can simply say dev for device, and then mgmt. Again, it leads you back to the same thing. You will see that the shortcut is also pointing to the device manager icon there. And there you have it. Same thing for the disk management console. This is again one of the important section where you will be, as an IT professional, will be doing a lot of work, or you will be, for a regular user, you probably have never gone and looked for the disk management console. All I think as a users, what we are so used to seeing is the C drive, and if we have maybe a D drive or bunch of disks installed, but usually this is what we see. Like, hey, this is my PC, here's my C drive and D drive. What you don't really see is the disk management. So again, same thing, type in search, I see disk. And if I start typing it up, it says disk management. The first thing I see says create and format disk partition. If I click on it, it's going to bring up the same similar view that I have. What this disk management is good for, again, same thing, disk management, here's a shortcut. Again, this might be on your exam, so keep an eye on it, but as professional, you should memorize these because you will be using them quite often. The important difference is in the previous class, for those who were in the previous class, you guys looked at the disk, right? You have one disk or a couple of disks installed on your computer. But then in one disk, you could have multiple partitions. You have the ability to create multiple partitions. And what partition is, you basically break them down. As an example, you can say that, hey, all of my office files, I want to store them in a different partition. All of my personal files, I want to save them in a different partition so they don't overlap each other. So you're basically creating a small storage buckets, if you will, on your disk. So as an example, if you look at I have two disks, but if you look at the disk one, which is a disk zero, I have a recovery partition right here. Then I have this health partition. Then I have C drive. And then I have another recovery partition here. And then I have the disk 2, which is basically right here is my other disk. This one is showing up is because I have external device attached to it. That's why this disk is also showing up. If you attach your thumb drive or flash drive, this will also show up here. So again, very important, we actually have a lab on it. So in the lab, you will see where you will be creating additional partitions, and we'll be actually doing that on the hands-on portion. And you get to basically play around with it a little bit more. Okay. Why is it important? Because in case if your disk is going bad or if we add more disks and you want to create different partitions, it's important for you to know where you can go and look at the details. Because a lot of the times, if you guys have noticed, we have the recovery partitions built into our computers, but they're not visible to you. You don't see them under C drive or D drive. But if you go under the disk management, you will see your recovery partition. As you can see it right here in this picture, the recovery partition is actually exist on your disk. You just don't see it because it's hidden. The manufacturer don't want you to accidentally delete it. Does anyone played around or looked into the disk management? Anyone? Nobody? If you're talking, just know that you might be on mute.
I can't say that I have. I haven't really got to that part yet. Daddy, I want to now that you've explained it, it's getting, it's
Yep,
sinking.
sounds good. There are more tools about the disk maintenance tools. One of them is the disk defragmentation. What that really means is, imagine if you go to a library, right? And in the library, if things weren't sorted out in a methodical way, you go to kids section, you go to sci-fi section, you go to IT section, you go to other sections. Imagine if these books weren't labeled as appropriately, if they weren't filed in appropriate section, how easily you would find the books in the library. It would be pretty tough, right? It would be pretty hard. So I think the same idea here with the disk fragmentation, which basically what that really means is it reallocate all of your files location on your disk. It basically files them, it sorts them out. So computer has a most efficient way to go and grab the files when you need them. Because as you're storing data, computer would go and store the data on random places on your disk. And what that really means is that once you use the defragmentation and optimize your disks and the drivers, it will basically help improve the read time. When you need to go and grab a file or work on a file, then that improvement is added if you basically run the defragmentation often. Again, the same idea. If you look for disk defragmentation, this will come up right here. I can analyze it. I can just run the optimization, etc., etc. Same thing here. I can analyze and optimize it as well. It sometimes, depending upon how big the disk you have, how much data you have stored, this could take maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes to maybe even an hours in some places. And there are different processes. Like if you see, I have a solid state drive as my C drive, and then I have a solid, not a solid, but hard drive or HDD, hard disk drive for my additional storage, which is my D drive. We did cover this in a little bit when we covered the hardware portion, so you will get to learn a little bit more what the subtle differences are between a solid state drive versus the hard disk drive. Disk cleanup is also another method, like if you're, just to improve your overall computer performance. So There are some third-party apps that you can use for disk cleanup, um, such as I use, where is the C Cleaner app. So this is actually, I downloaded it. Again, this is something that I use on my computer, but the idea is that what these free software or built-in software is meant to do is to like the um, clean the extra junk that you may have. Like, when we are visiting different websites, you are building that internet history. There are some stuff saved in your cache. You may have any download history, etc., etc. So all these things are being stored on your disks, which you may or may not even realize, right? So you could run this software and clean things up, which basically removes a lot of the garbage or things that might have been there for a long time. Like if I visited a website 6 months ago, it's going to keep a record that, hey, I visited the website 6 months ago, as an example. And it's just basically that record is sitting on my disk. Do I really need that record? Maybe, but you have the option to go and clean it up as well. So whenever I'm low on disk space, as an example, if you look at my disk, I'm very low on my C drive. So that's one of the things that I'm constantly doing is just cleaning it up, making sure that I have stuff that I only need, and any extra stuff that I don't need, I just remove it. Um, and same thing, identify and remove unwanted file cache. That's exactly what that cleanup means. Task scheduler, again, that's another tool. If you go look at the task scheduler again, if I just simply type in task, there's a task manager. But in this case, we are looking at task scheduler. And what that really means is it's looking is if you have something that you need to have it occur, if there is a task, if there is a disk cleanup task that you want to run every week or maybe every night, if you need to go or change anything on your system systematically or automatically, like you could set a schedule. So nowadays we have these fancy coffee machines that you can set an alarm and say that, hey, brew a coffee every morning for me at 6 o'clock. you know there's that automation built into it. So imagine the same thing in computers that we have, that we can take certain actions on every day on our behalf. As an example, a very common task is, I want to back up my data, right? So you can schedule your backup job where it says that, hey, every night at 11 o'clock, I want to back up all of my computer data. There is a very good reason for it. One of the reason is that, you don't want to lose your data. So task scheduler is basically just doing that. You can set the tasks to run automatically at whatever time you like, whatever interval you like. It could be a daily, weekly, or monthly schedule. And then if you are a programmer, you can even run a script to go do something, go do a thing. And then this task scheduler will be responsible that at that time is going to execute that action that you basically set it up to do. So make sure you guys remember what each of these tools are doing. Make sure you know the shortcuts and a brief descriptions, okay? But again, in the lab, we'll be looking at these things as well. I mean, you could look at it on your computer just like I'm showing you here, but if you want to look around, play around with it a little bit more, that's what I mean, and encourage you guys to go and look into it on your labs when you have your labs up. Local users and group console, that's also very important. So in the previous lab, one of the action items that we had was to create a local user account, right?
Okay, yeah. Yep. I
So
remember
if
that.
you so if you were to go and look at this, oops, see, so US, yeah, I think I don't have the paid version, but like I don't have the Windows Pro. But if we were to do this in your lab computers, you guys will see that I can get to the local users and groups. And what that really means is any user accounts that we have created locally, they will all be listed under in one section. You can see, okay, how many users do I see in the local group? Also groups as well, because I could have different groups. As an example, if you have a guest computer sitting up, when you walk into a hotel room, right, or a hotel, they usually have some free guest computers, right? You could create a group, which really means that, hey, what are these users? If a guest one, guest two, guest three users, they are part of the guest group, what they can and cannot do. This is why grouping is so important. If you are part of the administrator group, what you can and cannot do. Imagine you have guests in your house and the home members are sort of the administrator. They can walk into any section of the room in the house, you, your spouse, maybe your kids, but then your guest may only be allowed to be in the guest room or maybe a guest washroom or certain areas of the room, right? So that's the sort of same similar idea where you as an administrator can set those permissions. I bet you if you have your office laptop or office machines, there are certain restrictions that they have put in for you for your user account. You might be a member of a regular user, which you have enough permissions to do your job, but in order for you to install a software or remove a software, that might only be permissible just for the administrators, not for you guys, right? So this is where you need to pick up the phone and call your help desk folks. Hey, can you please help me with XYZ? You may even know how to do it, but you may not have the permissions to do it. So that's where you can quickly look at your computer, who are the local users, and if and also look at the groups and see which users are which part of the groups if you're managing those on the local machine. We will look into this a little bit more when we get to in the upcoming chapters, but this is an important concept. Just wanted you to know. Certificate master manager. That's again, it's each computer, like there are certificates that are built in out of the box on your computers, but in your organization, you may have additional certificates for your applications, even one for yourself, which you may not know, that you may require or that your company may require for you to communicate with other systems and applications. But important thing that you need to know that a computer or a user could have a digital identity, and that digital identity is driven from the certificate, which tells you that it is who you claim to be, right? So there are certificate authorities, like there are systems or vendors that issue you a certificate, which are trusted by other entities as well. So as an example, when I open up CompTIA site, there is this padlock right here. What that tells me, it is a secure, but it is secured with a it is secured with a certificate. Now this certificate tells you who the certificate is issued to. It says anything with CompTIA.org. So they may have different sites like learn.comptia, certmaster.comptia. So this is what this star means. And they tell you who is issued by, and then it's valid. Each certificate has an expiration date. So it tells you that, hey, it's valid from January of 23rd, 2022, all the way up to January 24th, 2023. It's valid for 1 year. And you can go into more detail and look at more value, but just know that digital certificates are very commonly used. It is used to secure communication, but it's also a way for you to validate that, hey, if I visit my banking website, this is the legitimate banking website that I expect to go, because you don't want to go to a fake website where they may steal your credentials, where they may steal your money, right? So the certificates are used for that purposes as well. Group policy editor, that's again another tool. And again, the certificate manager, you can also look at it. Manage computer certificates, it will show up right here. Same similar view, same thing for the group policy as well. You can say go gpedit.msc. But again, I have a home version, so it may not be there, but in your lab, you should be able to see that. But what really the group policy edit means that imagine you are the administrator, right? Let's say uh, you invite people over to your party, right? And you have to now manage 100 guests or maybe even
Mm-hmm.
thousands of guests, right? If you don't have certain things in a systematic way, it will be a chaos for you to manage all of those guests, right? Common sense, right? Make sense? You guys with me?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But imagine same thing in computers, right? You have to manage each computer individually, where if you need to make a change, you need to log into every single computer that you are managing. Let's say in government agencies and big companies, there are thousands of users. Forget about hundreds, thousands of users. They have thousands of servers as well. If I don't have a systematic way to manage those machines from a central place, it will be a chaos, right? So the same thinking, same logic, the group policy editor gives you the ability to secure these systems, to configure these systems in a systematic way where you can just set the policy in one machine on one server and you can roll that policy out to all of the machines that you want. So this becomes very easy. Let's say that a simple use case as an example is that you want your users to set their password, but the password, if you have an office computer or if you logged into another computer like your office computer, when you are trying to set up a password, they have a strict policy. They could say that, hey, your password must be 8 characters or long. It must have a number and a special character. You cannot use the password that you've used in the last 3 times. It must be a different password, as an example, right? All those things are part of the policy. And that policy is being managed by your administrator, and they're enforcing that policy. They're pushing that policy on your computers. Have you guys run into that?
Yeah, I've had to change mine several times.
Your password maybe expire every 90 days, every 60
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, they tell us to
Yep.
rechange it on the computers.
Mhm. So
Yes,
imagine
and
same
at
thing
my
for
house.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
those things or those settings are controlled by your administrator, and they're most likely pushing those policies on your computer through the group policy. They have a server probably or multiple servers where they're managing these policies and they push those policies out to all the workstations. And once they push them out, they can centrally manage and enforce those policy. And this is just one example. There are other things that they can control as well through the group policy. So the group policy is very powerful. It's very solid, very strong, and it's basically a best friend of the any system administrator because what it means detailed system and security configuration settings. They can push those settings out to the computers. There are some templates as well that comes out of the box, but again, you as the administrator, you as the IT professional have the ability to go and change. But where the help desk comes into play, you can look at those policies and see what's being enforced. If you run into any issues or you need to know that what group policies are. So for the exam. Registry editor, I don't know if you guys have played with the registry editors. Hopefully not as a regular users. That's not a common thing you run into, and I would not recommend you basically playing around with it. If you have played in the past, that's great. If not, don't. You can open this on your laptop, but this is one thing that I would probably say don't make any changes on your personal computer. You can do whatever you want to do with the lab system. You cannot break anything. Anytime you're installing a software, anytime you are doing a thing, all those changes are being tracked in your registry editor. Regedit is basically a shortcut. So as an example, when I go set up my time or my time zone on my machine, we talked about time zone last time, right? How does my computer know which time zone and I'm in, and how is it remembering that? As soon as I update it, a registry key will be updated. Anytime I set any preference that, hey, I want XYZ application on my desktop or on my taskbar, somewhere I'm updating this registry on my machine. So one of these registry keys are being updated to save my preferences. Because if you see, there are separate hives, they call like root keys and registry hives. And what that really means is that there are some things for a root. There are specific settings for under users, like control panel, consoles, applications, etc. And they can go advanced in length. If you're like troubleshooting sometime, the instructions may say, or especially like if you're like cleaning up some viruses or troubleshooting an application, you may have to go into registry edit to basically look at these settings and make some changes there. It's not every day, but you as professional may have to do that time to time. When I was a help desk guy, I used to play around with this a lot. But again, for a regular users, it's a no-no because you make a wrong change. What's going to happen? It's going to crash down your computer or you could break your computer. So very important, you have to be very careful. So if you look at it like each key, there is a value. Some values may not be set. So this is what they're saying. Editing the registry, there are some subkeys and value entries. There is name, data type, and value. You could take a backup in case if you are trying to make a lot of changes and you don't want to, on the safe side, you should always take a backup. So I could basically go in and take a backup of my registry. I can just do an export before I make any changes. So best practices, you want to make sure that you are taking backups. If I really want, I can just take a backup of this. I can export it if I want, if I'm going to be making bunch of changes. But just know that registry editor, like it's pretty common. A lot of the sysadmin or you as the help desk admin or help desk professional or IT professional may be looking into this. So you just need to know what the registry um, registry editor is and how they're helpful to you. As an example, like every time I open my computer, I want QuickBooks to run. As soon as I set that value, it will be an entry which will be recorded and captured in the registry editor for you. Custom management console. So all of the tools that we have looked at, okay, it's very hard for you to, as an example, the whole idea is you want to make it easier for you guys, right? So if I go in and say that, hey, I want registry editor, that's one thing that I'm looking at on daily basis. Maybe, certificate manager, I'm looking at that tool again on daily basis. I can look at I can use the management console to basically just add all of the tools that I use on regular basis, and I can have them available as a shortcut to me. So this is sort of a management console which you can tune and sort of have your favorites or your shortcuts in one place, so you don't have to continue go to either type them up or you can go to control panel to look them up and find them up. So the whole idea is like how you make your life easier. So this is one of the tools which you may end up using more than often, just to have all of your shortcuts in your fingertips under the Microsoft Management Console. All right, the second topic is use performance and troubleshooting tools. Again, one of the whole idea is that how you manage the computers and system, and but most importantly, if someone calls you, what tools do you have available? So we looked at a few tools in the previous section, and we'll continue to look at more tools in the upcoming section as well. So one of the tools you have, if you're wondering, the type of information a computer has or the hardware or the software version, you can even do it on your computer. Just type in one of the consolidated information about any machine will be listed under the system information. This is my system information here. It will tell me the summaries page will have what operating system do I have, what's the version, the manufacturer, the computer name, is it a 32-bit operating system or a 64-bit, what type of processor I have, the BIOS version I have, Um, how much memory do I have? How many disks do I have? Like all of that information is more or less will be listed here. The page file, we talked about virtual memory, right? It's right here.
Right.
Page file space is right now it's 2.3 GB is being used. Available virtual memory is 11 gigabytes. Total virtual memory is 18 gigabytes. So all of these things are at your glance, but if you look at it, there's a ton more information about your computer, hardware resources, the different components of your computer, software environment. So if I expand the hardware, more information. This is all about your memory. Okay. If I expand the components, display, modem, network, storage, I told you I have 2 hard drives. It will even tell me the different drives do I have, how much free space I have, what's the total space, etc., etc. All those are going to be here. One thing that you see here is his file system is NTFS. When we do the lab together, you will see why this is important, why this file system is important. So this is going to be important for us to look at it. Chris, let me just put you on mute real quick. So the system information page is very important, right? So you can look at the drives, you can look at the disks, and all of that information is at your fingertips. So that's one way to look at your.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I can barely see what's on the screen.
Is the font too small? Is that why?
Yes. And I have my glasses on. Like I was like, I'm struggling. I was like, let me just get my glasses, but with them, I still can't see. I can barely see.
Is it what I'm showing you on the computer, or is it even the slides are very small?
The slides were also a little bit small. Okay, so that one's, yeah, that one got a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I think I can zoom in here. But stuff that I'm showing, I think some things are, I don't know if I can even zoom in here. Let me see, view. Yeah, I may not be able to zoom in, but when we do the lab, hopefully that'll make it easier. This is just me showing off of my computer some of the things. But I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit more, wherever I can.
Somebody I want to keep up, but I have a Google Chrome laptop, so when I was trying to do that, it just took me straight to the internet when I was typing the things.
Yeah, no worries, because and that's where, I keep on harping, like the things that we are reviewing in these chapters, uh, when you're doing your labs, you should be able to see all of this stuff in your lab systems. And that's what I'm going to do as well, because there are some things that I can do, but in our lab systems, we should be able to do all of these things.
Yeah.
Um, but great point and good feedback. Event viewer is again, is another very, very, very handy tool for any system administrator, for even security professionals or any professional in that sense, because as things are happening on our machine, it's getting recorded. So a lot of the companies, they go in and change the audit policy where it says that, hey, any action that I take on my computer, on my system, on my application, I need to record all of these actions, because then they can go back and audit those actions to see if this is something that was intentionally done or maliciously done or whatever the use case might be. So the audit becomes pretty important. But for our like help desk and IT professionals, if for some reason you are having issues on your computer and you want to figure out why a certain thing is not working or behaving in a specific way, then the first thing you would look at is probably the event viewer. This is where it will have the logs. So if I type in event viewer on my screen, it will bring up this window. So in here, it will tell us that, hey, I have application logs. You see there will be a bunch of logs here. On my machine, I have 32,000 logs, but again, in your office computer or on your servers, they may have thousands and thousands of log, way more than this. I have security events. As an example, who logged in at what time, etc., etc. Like I see this special log on and log on activity. Hey, this system, this user logged in at this specific time, or this is what I saw happening on your machine. So all of that information will be recorded on your system. Same thing if you are setting up something, installing something, your system log, if there are any errors, if you're seeing something, you will see that there's a lot of informational events that I see information. I see some warnings, I see some errors. So all of that really means that my system is just recording or seeing a bunch of things, and it just continue to record and log that information. We as an IT professional, if someone comes up to you and say that, hey, I was trying to install the application yesterday at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, can you help me and figure out what's going on? Maybe one of the way I want to look at it, again, the time zone is very important. I will see that, hey, the time zone is Eastern here, 6:54. So yesterday at 1 o'clock, let me go back on a previous day and see if I see any errors under the application logs. Do I see anything obvious with error or something? See what I mean? It says that user Hive is loaded by another process, and here's a process that's running. This is just an example, right? It could be another error about that application. Hey, this application was having issues, or there was an error that my system recorded. This is a general information that has the what type of log it is, where this came from, what the event ID is, whether it was error, informational, etc., which computer it came from, and most importantly, what time was it. In detail section, you may have a lot more information. You see that there's a lot more information that gets stored, which may be valuable, which may not be. But again, the important piece is Event Viewer is a very important troubleshooting tool for IT professionals. And this is where they're saying system security, application events, event sources could be, the source application and maybe a specific ID. It could be critical error, warning, and information level, as well as it could be audit of success or failure. Like, hey, if there is a successful login, I want to record that information. Even if it's a failed login, I also want to record that information. So at the end of the day, you as the administrator have the ability to basically define what you would like to collect and what you don't like to collect, like what audit policies you have that you care about. Task manager may be one of the things that that you guys may have seen this before. How many have you guys used the task manager before? Anybody? Task manager? Nobody?
Yeah, not me.
If I
Not that I
right
have.
click on it, I can right click and get to task manager, or I can just type in here task manager. This will tell us a lot of information, such as the very first thing by default, it says processes. What applications are running? Sometimes like our application may get hung up where it's just not responding. You're trying to click on this X again and again and nothing is taking place. You can come in here and say that, hey, this application is running. I really don't want it to run because it's frozen. It may be stuck. I can say end task. I just close my task manager, just so you know. So task manager is very good way for you to see how much CPU memory you are using. If there are programs that might be using high memory or they're using a lot of your resources, as an example, you see I have Microsoft Teams running and it's using almost 715 megs of my memory. That's quite a bit. Why? Because it's a big application. I'm sharing my screen. My audio is being transferred. I'm probably able to hear you guys as well. So it's taking a good chunk of my memory resource of my computer. The next big one is the Chrome, my internet browser, so on and so forth. So this is a good way for you to see which processes are running, how much resources they are taking. We also see power usage. If there is an application that might be using the power consumption. You know, I mean, right now I'm plugged in, but if I was not plugged in, then which application might be using more energy? There are other sections like performance. Hey, how much CPU am I using? How much memory am I using? The disk utilization, what's my Wi-Fi looks like. I am probably using high Wi-Fi right now just because, you know, I have my internet up as well as I have Microsoft Teams for this class up and running. So my usage probably is higher than normal, but which is expected. Same thing, if I was like saving or downloading a lot of stuff, this usage will also go up and you can see these spikes. So if users are complaining that, hey, my computer is running slow or my application is stuck or whatever issues you're having, so Task Manager is a good place to come in and see what's happening on the machine, what's running, what's not running, and what are some of the things that you can start looking into. Performance, same way. App history, what type of apps have been running, again, more information. What application are starting up, that's one of the things that I talked about. Like when I power on my computer, when I push the power button, which applications start automatically? And here's a quick way for you to see these are the things that are starting automatically. Do I really want this Skype to be running every time? No. This is why it says the status is disabled. I don't want Skype to be running every time I turn on my machine. It's just not right because I'm not using Skype all the time. What about WebEx? I have WebEx installed and it says every time I power on my machine, the WebEx will run. This is maybe an application that I use it on a regular basis, so it's okay. But if you install it one time and you had that one meeting and you never really use it, does it even make sense for you to have that enabled? Because a lot of time you see for a regular user, they don't know this, but if you just continue installing applications and so much software, when you power on that computer and it takes 5-10 minutes to get to the login screen, or you type in your password and you have to wait a few minutes before the screen shows up, it's probably you have a lot of things running on your machine.
Okay.
So this is a good way for you to look into it. If you have multiple users using the machine, how many users are logged in and what are they doing? What are sort of the resources they are taking up? More detail. We said that every single probably we covered this in the last class, but we will get into this a little bit more in the coming classes. Every application that I run, it's associated with a port. It's associated with the process name and a process ID on our machine. So right now I see that every application that's running, it has a process ID number. That's an ID for this process. If I have Chrome running and I have a bunch of tabs that are open under Chrome, that means that I see a bunch of these chrome.exes. Each tab has its own process ID number. So on and so forth. And I can sort it by memory. Who's using the highest memory? We said it's already Microsoft Teams, and there it is. Same thing, services. We'll get into the services a little bit more in the upcoming chapters. But just know that everything that we're doing has a service associated with, like AVG, my antivirus has a service. I want to print a document. There is a printer service as well. If I go under P, there should be a print service right here. So on and so forth. Make sense, guys?
So, question:
Makes sense.
the service is that like an action that's done?
Service is something that is associated with an application.
Okay, okay.
So if as an example, I'm using this PDF document, right? This Adobe Acrobat, where I'm looking at the syllabus. If I look at it, there is a process or a service associated with it, where it says that, hey, you are running this application. Here is a process ID, and here's a status that it's running. It's being run by this user called Awesome, and I may have another service that's running. So if I just simply go and say, hey, end task, or end this process, see what happens. Now, Acrobat is no longer there, and that document is closed. See what I mean?
Yeah, I see.
Yep. Excellent question, guys. We already looked at the performance, right? We already looked at the users tab. I can, if there are multiple users that are logged in, I can also just sign them off as an administrator. Startup processes, we already looked at it. We talked about it. Resource monitor, that's another view for the administrator. Again, if the users are complaining, their computers are running slow, or they are having some performance issues, and there could be a legitimate issues as well, right? So another tool you have outside of the task manager is the resource monitor. So again, if you look at the resource monitor, this gives you a more view into each of the section. How is your CPU doing? How much utilization do you have? How much memory are you using, and which services or which applications are using your CPU utilization? Same thing for memory. Which processes are taking or eating up most of your memory, right? We already looked at this same similar information in the task manager, but again, if you need more information, the resource monitor is a good way for you to look into more detail. You have the ability to end the process or analyze it or suspend the process if you want, or even go online and learn more about it. But just know that these are some of the performance indicators. Do you look at these on a regular basis as an administrator or as a help desk person? No. There are certain cases where, hey, my computer is running slow. Maybe it's my disk, maybe it has to do with my memory, or you just can't figure it out. These are some of the tools that you can start looking into to basically investigate what is actually happening on the system. Is there a thing that I'm not seeing? Sometimes it's a malware. Sometimes you can identify that easily, sometimes you cannot. But these are some of the tools that Microsoft gives you out of the box to basically use it to investigate or to triage. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, how can you tell if it's malware?
Sometimes there are some indicators. I think we'll have a chapter around it. One of the indicators that all of a sudden your computer is running slow, maybe you have these things flashing on your screen about malware. And sometimes it's not that easy to detect, unfortunately.
So malware can be like spam.
It could be, yes, malware is, yeah, spam. It could be spam. It could be, nowadays the ransomware is very common, where they can encrypt and lock all of the files, and then they will say that, hey, transfer us the bitcoins or money to this account if you want access to your files. So there are many ways of ransomware, but most commonly you will see like spam. That's very common. You see things flashing up, or you will see ransomware lately that has been pretty evident, and they don't try to hide. Once they got your machine locked up, they will start flashing that on your screen that, hey, we got access to your machine, we've encrypted all of your files. If you don't pay us the money, then we will delete all of your data. And actually, it's not just the user. A lot of companies, even government agencies, have been a victim of this. Where, like, if you are running a company and you have the sensitive file, you've been working on projects for some time, and that's a deliverable, and all of a sudden they deleted all of your backups. The only copy you have has been encrypted, and you may not have any option but to pay them and hope that they give you access back to your files. Make sense, guys?
Yes.
Cool.
That happened to one of my doctors.
Oh yeah?
His office. Yeah,
Oh
his
man.
office was ransomware.
Oh my God. What did he
Locked his,
do?
locked his computers up and files and everything, and they had no choice but to pay him. They did the same thing you just described. They
How much
said,
money
"Hey,
did they pay?
They asked for like, what was it, a couple of millions? It was something like that. It
Oh
was
my
millions.
God.
God.
It was millions. He had no choice. You know, I
Yeah.
think he got some help from somewhere or something like that, but it was a significant amount of money.
Yeah, these things are real, guys.
They told him they would delete everything, all his patient's files, everything, everything he had. And yeah,
Yeah, that's wild.
That's wild, but that's real.
Mm.
Performance count, again, we just looked at it, right? You can look at the performance counter. You can look at the, how much data is receiving, how long is it taking for the data to process. Same thing for memory, how much memory, being used at any given time. Again, on the individual computers, this may not be a big of a deal, but if you have like big servers and things where like you're using virtualization, where you're using a lot of the hardware, uh, you know, this may become a more most used tool, if you will, because at the end of the day, it's like, what are you troubleshooting, what issues are you looking at, and what type of machine it is. If it's a server, these things may be looked at even more closely, just to make sure that, if because if it's your individual computer, if something happens, you as that single user will be impacted. But imagine if it's a server where like hundred and thousands of users are accessing their files and application, then that outage could become very significant. So where they may have more controls and more visibility onto the servers versus your machine. But just know that these tools exist and you have them at your discretion. This was actually one of the interview question. One of my actually friend had it, the system configuration utility. You see that the interview question that was asked that, hey, if you need to access the system configuration utility, what's the shortcut? And the shortcut was msconfig.exe. So he could not answer it, and he did not get the job, unfortunately. Again, it's like, really, is that what you really wanted me to ask? But again, msconfig, that's the system configuration utility. And hence this is a shortcut. The reason I remember it very well, because my friend actually a long time ago, he came back and he's like, hey, this is the interview question that I got and I couldn't answer it. So this was the the MS config answer. We really haven't gotten into more detail about the safe boots and whatnot. That's going to be the upcoming chapters. We have a lab around it as well. So I'll actually hold on to it going into more about the safe mode or safe boot and some of the other additional boot types. But just know that in the system utility, you have the option where if you are again dealing with malware or your system is not behaving appropriately, you can change the boot option where you can say that, hey, next time this computer restarts, I want that computer to restart in a normal way, or you can just have that system go into a safe boot mode. Same thing, we already looked at the services tab, where again, if I look at the boot, it says like general is hey, startup normally, do the diagnostic startup, or you can do selective startup if you want. Again, you really don't mess with it, but the important option here is the safe boot, but we will also learn how to do that manually if we want it. Services, again, stuff that start or services that are going to be running automatically on your system. So there's a long list of services that are going to be running automatically. And a lot of that has to do with, the built-in hardware and the drivers that are required for your system to operate. But just know that like Adobe Acrobat, as we were looking at, like this is running automatically. Do I really want this to be running? Probably not, but that's again for you to decide if your computer is having some performance issues. We already looked at the startup in the task manager, but again, this is another way or another place for you to look at it. Same thing goes for the tools as well. What tools you have available. As an example, one of the ones that we looked at was the event viewer. The other one is system information, computer management, all of the things that we have looked at. You can basically just launch them from here as well. As an example, event viewer is there. I can just simply say, go ahead and launch event viewer, and it will just come up. So there are multiple ways for you to get around and find these tools, but just know that these are a couple of options that you have within this system menu under system configuration. Guys, that was the second section. I know we have been ongoing for hour and 15 minutes. Let's take a good 7 minutes break.